Freaks. Not to be mistaken with Freaks. Freaks, You're One of Us is not to be mistaken with Freaks. That's also on Netflix. As you'll see, the title's called Freaks, and another movie called Freaks, and they both have similar themes. One's in a different language though, so there's that difference. Tipped by a mysterious tramp, a meek fry cook discovers she has superpowers and uncovers an unsavory, vast conspiracy. It's a German film origin superhero story, and we've seen this done a million times. What intrigued me was it's a German film, for one, because I'm loving what's coming out of Germany. If you like Dark, then you'll understand how great Dark is. So I had fairly high expectations. That probably was not the right thing to go into this film for. It's not to say that this film doesn't have moments that I feel like, oh, that was pretty cool. But for the majority, there were things that really pulled me out of the film. There were things that really pulled me into the film. So the soundtrack, when it lent into its 80s kind of retro theme, which a lot of films seems to be doing, a lot of series seems to be doing ever since like Stranger Things have been making that kind of popular again. It did work in this. I like the protagonist, the female protagonist. I think she holds her own in the role, so it's that coming of age origin story. So she is an adult and she has a partner and a kid. She's not coming of age, but she's coming of age in her origins. So you get all that. She's kind of discovering her powers. She's on medication, and once she stops the medication, her powers start to manifest. It is very similar also to Freaks in the Freaks, the other Freaks English American superhero film, but that's mostly in title and kind of the genre of how humans class anybody with powers as freaks, and so that they have that in connection, but the rest of it is quite different. So if you were like, oh, how did that end up happening, don't worry, there are different films, although the subject matter is the same. It's basically people who are judged for having powers or feared, and so here we have the same thing. There is a government that are taking these people that have powers, giving them pills to suppress their powers, and for those that are not controllable, will put them in a facility. You know, it's very X-Men like in that way. And so when it starts leaning into the X-Men kind of themes, you feel like you should get more of that. And I felt like when we did see superpowers, they were cool, but also just not quite right. You'll know what I mean when you see it. Just didn't look quite right. Your body and your eyes, you'll be like, hang on a minute, what? That's weird. If someone is attacking somebody and they go flying across the screen, and you're like, that just looked like weird ragdoll physics. The camera cuts cleverly so they don't have to show everything. There's a lot of not showing you. You're hearing what's happening, so you don't get to see a lot of the superhero powers. There is also some very bad acting. There's some, especially scenes of I guess you would call them extras with dialogue lines. And so there was one particular scene where someone gets thrown over a table, and the guy that is at their house is watching, and he's kind of nodding and shaking his head like, I can't believe you've done that. It's the worst kind of direction and delivery as an actor that I've seen in a long time. That just made me cringe, and that is kind of dotted out throughout the film. There are moments and reactions. I don't know if it's the directing or the actors themselves. I feel like it's a bit of both. I feel like had they had more time maybe in filming, they could have really polished some of those moments, some of those movements that they wanted from the actors to really kind of bring out the best that they could. There's also moments with the CG that needed to be polished. I feel like it needed another go over. And I hate coming down hard on films because I know how much effort it takes to make a film. I've done shorts, I've been involved in features, I've been around the camera, I know the long days of toil and struggle, so I get it. But as a film reviewer, a film lover, sometimes when there's issues with films, you just have to be honest of what you saw, what you felt. And so there is stuff to enjoy in this, but I've seen other films that have done this much better, and there are lots of tropes in this film. It kind of ticks all the trope boxes. There were moments when I felt like, oh, okay, they're really going to dig into that. And you kind of see the origins of a couple of characters. And it reminded me a little bit in places of films like Unbreakable. It had a real world element to it. And that's when I started really kind of getting invested into the film. And I was like, yes, okay, this is going the right way. I'm enjoying this now. But then it would go, is this a comedy, or is this you're not going into the deep, the darkness? It wasn't funny, like levity that they needed. It was just like, oh, this is a bit too cheesy now, and just didn't quite work for me in those moments. So there's a lot going on in this film. It's like it's trying to be all superhero films, but also be indie, but also be different. And I was just like, well, what are you? Choose a theme, choose a place you want to go, and go that way. So when it was more like Unbreakable, more realistic, it felt better. But when they started getting into the cliche stuff, I was just like, oh, I don't know what you're doing or where you're going with this. It was hard to feel emotionally engaged with the main protagonist as well, because when she's discovering her powers, she also kind of neglects her family, and I just didn't quite buy that. I just didn't feel like that would happen. There would be a certain neglection, but what she ends up doing with another character, or almost doing, I was like, I don't know that seems I just didn't buy that part in the storyline, which bugged me a little. So you have this superhero film that we've seen before. It starts off with life is hard. It starts off with I'm going to discover what my powers are, and then you've got to defeat yourself, and you've got to grow stronger, and you've got to level up, and then you know the government's going to try and get you, and then when something happens and you're going to be underpowered, but there's going to be a bad guy. Thankfully there is kind of a bad guy in this, that the protagonist will have to go and defeat it. It ticks every generalized superhero box that you need. Unfortunately, I was expecting this to be something unique, something different. Not every film has to be brilliant and Oscar worthy, but I was just really hoping for something a bit more fun, and it wasn't that for me. So I'm gonna have to give this a D+. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about this film. Have you heard of it? Were you excited to see it? I'm disappointed with this one. I was really expecting it to be more than what it is. There is a nice little end credit scene if you're into that and you want to watch more and you're wondering what happened with a certain character. It's cheesy, but that's fine. That's kind of what I expected from this film now. Yeah, I like the protagonist. I like some of the score. I like some of the action, but for the most part, I was disappointed. Maybe you loved it. Let me know in the comments. But most of all, until next time, remember, live long and Tuesday.